welcome to Macros with Mythili, the ET Now show that takes a hard look at all the major macroeconomic issues and developments. In this issue, we're going to take a hard look at the ongoing controversy over the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission. While it is the shift to the 2011 census numbers as against the 1971 census that has grabbed the headlines, it is only one of the issues that has the state up in arms. So in this edition, we're going to try and make sense of the raging controversy. Is it warranted, or are the state's fears exaggerated? Is it the beginning of the end to what the BJP called cooperative federalism? Given the time constraint, let me plunge into discussion right away with my stellar panel. Dr. C. Rangarajan, Chairman of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council under the UPA government and also Chairman 12th Finance Commission, and Indira Rajaraman, eminent economist and member 13th Finance Commission. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rangarajan and Indira. Indira, let me start by asking you something that's been puzzling me. Why is it that though the terms of reference were notified in November 27 to be precise, it's only now, almost 4 months later, that such a raging controversy has erupted? I'm at a bit of a loss to understand. What is your take on it, Indira? In the initial apparent acquiescence and now the raging controversy, so much so that the Finance Commission has apparently appointed an expert panel to look into the terms of reference. Indira?
I share your puzzlement, Mythili. I don't know why it erupted so late. Perhaps it took some time for the states to absorb the contents of the terms of reference and to get together. My sense, though, is that this initiative is petering out. I had heard that in early May, they were going to do a follow-up letter to the President of India asking that the terms of reference be looked into. I don't think that has happened or is likely to happen.
Okay. Dr. Rangarajan, while the Constitution lays down some very specific issues that must form part of the terms of reference, it also gives the Union government a fair amount of leeway under the any other matter clause. So is it really entirely up to the Union to decide what it wants to refer to the Finance Commission? And some of these might not have been referred to the Finance Commissions in the past. We'll come to the specifics later, but my question really now is on the broad issue of whether the Union government is in any way constrained while deciding the terms of reference. Dr. Rangarajan?
Well, in formulating the terms of reference to the Finance Commission, usually the Government of India also consults the state governments. There is some kind of an informal meeting. I think that over years, certain conventions have developed, and perhaps this time the controversy or the contentious issues have been raised in a more formal way than before. The concerns of the southern finance ministers has been voiced somewhat vigorously. But broadly speaking, I think there are two things that need to be taken into account. One is that the concern of the finance ministers of the southern states particularly regarding population can be discussed later, but the point really is that the most important issue is relating to equity. I think one of the major issues before all the finance commissions, not only in India but also elsewhere, has been the equalization principle. One of the governing principles of the distribution of resources is to allocate resources or in such a way that the fiscal capacities of the different states of the constituent units are maintained in such a way that certain services are made available to all the people in a uniform way. Therefore, the concern regarding the loss in the share of some of the states is more due to the application of the equity principle rather than the population principle. It also, in India, the major criterion that has been used in this context has been the income difference criterion, where states whose per capita income is much lower than the highest per capita income have been compensated heavily. And the weight given to this particular criterion was as high as 50% in the 14th Finance Commission, but there was one commission in which the weight was almost 62.5%. Therefore, they need to look at not so much the population criterion as much as the equity principle and the equalization principle. Perhaps a balance is required to be struck now And I think that is where the focus should be.
Absolutely. Getting a balance is always difficult. But Indira, now that the preliminaries are out of the way, let me go to the main bone of contention. Use of the 2011 census data. What is your position on this? Will it really work to the detriment of states that have really succeeded in checking their population growth? And does it really effectively penalize the good and reward the bad, as it were, Indira?
I've written on this, as you know. It makes no sense at all at this point in 2018 to go by 1971 population relativities. At the end of the day, the Finance Commission is about equitable distribution of resources across the landscape of this country, which is characterized by huge regional inequalities and huge imbalances in population between states. Now, as you know, the 1971 census population relativities were enforced for a period of 35 years, simply in order to exclude any kind of perverse incentive for states to go easy on population control. But at this point, I think a correction is needed. And I absolutely don't see how a state which has done well on the population criterion and has controlled its population, has gained from it, could possibly object to this correction, which was long overdue. Let me also quickly add that if you read the terms of reference in detail, you will find that there is a provision for states, for the Finance Commission to take account of population control measures taken by states and their move, the pace of their move towards the replacement level of population. So there is a balancing element in the terms of reference, even on the population criterion alone. So no cause for complaint, as I see it.
Okay, Dr. Rangarajan, Indira sees no cause for complaint. Would you agree? Because even in the 14th Finance Commission terms of reference, though they were asked to look at 1971 census, they were also asked to take into consideration the subsequent population developments. So would you agree that states really have no cause, the southern states have no cause to complain whatsoever? Dr. Rangarajan?
Well, as Indira pointed out, that apart from saying that the current population should be taken into account, there is also a reference to compensating states for the good work they might have done in population control. But just to go back to the fundamental principle, the idea of including population as a criterion is because that the services rendered will be larger if the people are larger. And therefore, to look at population which was there 50 years ago. That's what it will happen by the beginning of the 15th Finance Commission recommendations come into effect, is really not appropriate. If we want to compensate states for the good work that they have done in terms of population control, you can do it through some other means. But when population as a criterion is used as a proxy for the extent to which the fiscal capacities should be increased, then I believe taking the current population is the most appropriate thing. And the most important thing is that the weight that has been given to population has varied. You look at the past finance commissions, it has varied from 10% to 25%. Given the fact that the right way to do is to take the current population, the 15th Finance Commission must take a relook at the weight attached to population. Perhaps I believe that there is a case for lowering the weight for population, and also, as I said, lowering the weight for the income difference criterion as well. Because even in the income difference criterion, population enters into the picture. Therefore, my feeling is that using the 2000 current population is the most appropriate thing, because even in the income difference criterion, when you calculate the per capita income, per capita GDP, always current population is used. Therefore, what you have is a mix of things, even earlier. Therefore, I would suggest that the best thing is to use the 2011 population as a criterion, and perhaps relook at the weight that should be given to population.
Okay, so not much sympathy for the southern states from either Indira and Dr. Rangarajan, both of whom, mind you, are South Indians. But let me just quickly move to the next big bone of contention. The 15th Finance Commission is asked to examine the case for revenue deficit grants. Is there a case for such grants, Indira? Or does it again reward states that fail to really pull their weight in taxing their citizens and opt instead to become free riders in some sense? Agreed, the scope for that has come down with GST, especially since GST favors the consuming states that are generally poorer. But large parts of the economy are currently outside GST. And revenue deficit, to my mind, is in any case an outcome of excess spending vis-a-vis the revenue. So the shift to GST alone will not remove the free rider problem. Do you agree, Indira?
On the revenue deficit, I have always been opposed to that as a practice followed by finance commissions. It's simply because it carries a perverse incentive. It carries an incentive for states to overstate their expenditures and understate their revenues. As you rightly say, after GST, there is a more external source of data on their revenues. But overstating of expenditures is something that states are prone to do if they think that will get them a higher revenue deficit grant. In order to correct that, perverse incentive embedded in a revenue deficit grant, what finance commissions have tended to do has been to correct states' expenditure projections for what is called by what is called normative considerations, taming those down and making them conform to some kind of normative benchmark. But that by itself departs from what states' projections are, and it really makes no sense. You're enforcing a certain expenditure discipline which might not obtain in practice, and therefore whatever revenue deficit grant you give is not really going to cover their revenue deficit if they are not going to correct their expenditure profligacy. And as a recent article has pointed out by V. Bhaskar, who was a joint secretary in the 13th Finance Commission, he has looked at the revenue deficits which have obtained in states after the period of the 14th Finance Commission began, that is from 2015-16, and he finds that they are way out of line with what the Commission granted in the way of revenue deficit grants. So really, that is an absurdity that it's time to get rid of.
Oh, well, maybe it's time to get rid of, but Dr. Amit Mitra is not going to be very happy if one were to do that, really. But I'm afraid it's time for us to slip into a very short break. Please do stay with us. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and I'm in discussion with Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Indira Rajaraman on the controversy over the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission. Dr. Rangarajan, I understand you want to say join issues maybe with Indira on the revenue deficit grant, but I also wanted to ask you that the overriding objective, at least with the horizontal transfers, is, as you said, to enable all states to be able to provide comparable levels of service at comparable tax rates while ensuring that the budget balance, at least in the revenue account, so that equity considerations play a big role also in all Finance Commission recommendations. But if I were to play the devil's advocate, can't I argue that, harsh as it sounds, efficiency must also be rewarded? So the gap-filling approach that has been adopted by all Finance Commissions, based of course on a variety of parameters, could really end up once again rewarding the inefficient state governments. And yes, it does penalize the people living in those states, but you can say that in a democracy, ultimately you get the government you deserve. Dr. Rangarajan?
Well, on the revenue deficit grant, I agree with Indira. I mean, I think the point really is that the gap-filling approach has been heavily criticized. The manner in which the revenue deficit grants are given even today, subject to, even though some norms are imposed, are still in the category of a gap-filling approach, and this has been criticized by many fiscal experts. Therefore, what is really needed is not the abolition of the revenue deficit grants. I mean, the provision exists in the Constitution, and perhaps we should go ahead with it. But what is really needed is to clearly state the norms and the principles which will be followed in evaluating the revenue deficit grant or in arriving at the revenue deficit grant. Therefore, the charge of gap filling should not be there. And I think it is not, if a pure gap filling approach is adopted, then it has a perverse incentive as far as the state governments are concerned. Therefore, the question is not the abolition of the revenue deficit grant, but the question is the principles and the norms that will be established before arriving at the revenue deficit grants that are to be given. As far as horizontal distribution is concerned, as we allocate more and more of the share to the states, contribution also becomes important. That is where, in some sense, fiscal prudence, the ability of the state to contribute to the overall tax kitty also becomes relevant. I would say, as the percentage increases, it is important that what the states are able to contribute to the total tax kitty must also be taken into account. Wow. Of course, in the days when income tax alone was shared, it was done, but there were problems. I agree that in assessing the extent of contribution, there are problems. But basically, two things must be borne in mind. Since several of the taxes are vested in the center only on grounds of administrative ease and efficiency, a share automatically belongs to the states. And therefore, contribution by the states must be taken into account, and some ingenuity in arriving at what that contribution should be there. The second, of course, is what you said. To the extent possible, I think where possible, we should really introduce the element of fiscal prudence and efficiency in the use of resources.
Okay, except that it's very difficult to define prudence, efficiency, etc. Indira, but another controversial issue is the inclusion of some of the union government schemes in the terms of reference. But does the mere inclusion of these aspects smack of the union government playing heavy brother? States say, why should we look at your schemes, the progress? Why should that be a yardstick? Would you agree that they have a case?
Not exactly. You must recall that in the terms of reference, they only refer to the outcomes under those schemes. And those outcomes, one would have thought, would be outcomes that the states would desire for themselves. Surely it is important for all states to get rid of open defecation, which is actually mentioned explicitly in the TOR. Other things like better literacy, better health indicators, lower infant mortality. These are all, objectives that one imagines all states would share. So I don't see that as particularly troublesome.
Okay, I think this is that states in the center always have a slightly fractious kind of relationship. But Dr. Rangarajan, some experts have also taken umbrage to the fact that the 15th Finance Commission has been tasked with examining whether the 14th Finance Commission's recommendations has really left the union without enough resources. Is this unreasonable? Particularly since the 14th Finance Commission also had something very similar in its terms of reference, which said that the Commission shall review the state of finances, deficit and debt levels of the union and states, keeping in view in particular the fiscal consolidation roadmap recommended by the 13th Finance Commission, and suggests measures for maintaining a stable and sustainable fiscal environment. You mentioned that it's important to see that the union has enough resources. So would you agree that this is a very unreasonable demand, or is there some merit to it, Dr. Rangarajan?
Well, it is understood that any finance commission will review the share in relation to the vertical distribution. It was not necessary so much for the government of India to say this, because any commission will do that. Every commission looks at what the previous few commissions have done in relation to the vertical distribution and decides on what is appropriate. I would say that the better thing would have been for the center to place before the Finance Commission what its concerns were, rather than putting it in the terms of a reference itself. If they have felt tight as a consequence of the distribution recommended by a Finance Commission, then they should place it before the new Finance Commission. But having said that, the point is that the 15th Finance Commission will naturally look at whether the 42% share allowed by the 14th Finance Commission is appropriate. I do not know whether there is any scope for increasing it. They will have to think. And also it is very difficult for any Finance Commission to reduce the share that has been given by a previous commission. This has not happened, and I doubt very much whether the new 15th Finance Commission will be able to do it. But the point really is what I said earlier, namely that in deciding on the vertical distribution, we should look at the responsibilities given to the center, not only in the Constitution, but also take into account the perceptions of the people. I think the expectation of the people from the center, even on economic matters which may be exclusively in the purview of the state, is also increasing. Therefore, that must be borne in mind while doing it. But basically, as I said, too long a term of reference is not a desirable thing. I think the Finance Commissions know better. But certainly, I am sure that the 15th Finance Commission will look at what the 14th Finance Commission has done on vertical distribution and take its own decision.
Okay, so could have been done less in your face, as it were. But Indira, finance commissions have typically assessed the state's taxable capacity, but people have argued that there is no such attempt made at all in the case of the union government, and the existing tax collections are simply extrapolated forward. Does that need to change, and why has that not been done so far?
I would say that the union government's projections are just taken forward. Finance commissions engage in extended discussions with all ministries at the center, in addition to all states, of course. And I don't think the union government's projections are taken just at face value without critical examination. But coming back to the 42%, if I may, I don't believe the terms of reference were out of line in suggesting that, and right in the terms of reference, rather than in an informal engagement with the Commission, that they take account of this percentage as it has presently been drawn up. And of course, this percentage has steadily risen from the first Finance Commission, but there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be reduced by the 15th Finance Commission. Nothing in the Constitution which precludes that. And if in their examination and they believe that 42% has gone a bit too high, they're entirely free to reduce it, as long as they justify their reduction.
Okay, but that's going to be very, very difficult. So, Dr. Rangarajan, I now come to my last question. So, given all this, should the terms of reference be amended, as some state governments are now demanding? There have been precedents in the past, but now not like this. It was never so fractious as it is now. So, very quickly, should the terms of reference be amended?
I don't think the terms of references should be amended. If there are concerns of the certain states and these concerns should be placed before the President, and the President can just forward them, or the states themselves have an opportunity to come before the Commission, argue before them, and therefore they should do it. I think whatever has been done so far indicates the concerns that the people have, but as I said, sometimes they are not looking at the right tree. I mean, I think the barking at the wrong tree, for example, it is not so much the population as much as the income difference criterion, which has been responsible for reducing the share of not only the southern states, many of the advanced states. Then it is a question of how much relevance and importance you want to give to equity. I think that's the issue. Therefore, to come back to your question, I think that the terms of reference may remain as they are. As I said, it's such a long one is perhaps cumbersome, but it has already been issued. But I am quite sure that the 15th Finance Commission will examine the terms of reference from its own point of view and come to the conclusion. It is not mandatory that the Finance Commission should act in a way in which, or in the spirit in which some of the conditions or some of the references are made. It is up to the Commission to do it. Therefore, no need for amending the terms of reference, but all the concerns should be placed before the 15th Finance Commission.
Agree, Indira, no case for amending the terms?
Absolutely. In fact, I think it would be altogether inappropriate for such an amendment to be issued. These are terms of reference which have been signed by the President of India. As I said, it would be very bad for the institution of the President of India to go back on terms of reference that have already been issued. But aside from that, there is absolutely nothing in the TOR which enjoins upon the Commission a kind of direction or a command. These are just requests for the Finance Commission to take into consideration. What's wrong with that? why can't they take those things into consideration and perhaps reject some of them as unsuitable or not practical? There is a strong institutional history in our country whereby Finance Commission reports have been treated with respect and their recommendations accepted. So following in that tradition, they're free to do that. The only direction that has been given to the Finance Commission is the one about the 2011 population census, and I think that is altogether justified.
Okay, so no case whatsoever to amend the terms of reference. Finance commissions are independent bodies and they should live up to the reputation and the legacy of finance commissions and go ahead and take cognizance of whatever the terms of reference they feel really deserve merit. Thank you so much, Dr. Rangarajan and Dr. Indira Rajaraman, for joining me in this discussion. Thank you also for watching. Remember, we'll be back next week with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.